Malik stood outside the courthouse in an old hoodie that hung off his thin frame. It was faded and too big, with a missing button near the neck. Winter wind pushed against him, but he didn't shiver. He just stood still, quiet, eyes focused on the building ahead. He was 17, tall but soft-spoken. He didn't have much, but he walked like he carried something more important than money. People in his neighborhood called him the quiet one. He didn't hang out on corners, didn't skip class. He was the kind of kid who stayed late at the library and helped his grandma with groceries. The kind of boy most folks never noticed, until someone pointed. Malik lived with his grandmother. His mom had passed the year before, and folks didn't talk about his father much. Some said he left. Others said he was just gone. Malik never corrected them. He kept his head down, focused on school, stayed out of trouble. But now he was here, outside a courtroom, accused of something he didn't do, and even though his hands were shaking just a little, he kept them in his pockets. He wasn't scared. Not exactly. Just tired. But this wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. This was about to become a lesson in judgment, for everyone in that courtroom. They said Malik stole a wallet. A woman at the shopping mall told the police she saw someone in a hoodie near her purse. She couldn't say for sure if it was him, but when they asked, she pointed at Malik, the only black teen nearby, sitting alone on a bench. That was all it took. The police questioned him on the spot. He didn't run. He didn't raise his voice. He just told them he hadn't touched anything. That he was waiting for the bus, reading a book. Still, they arrested him. At the station, no evidence was found. No wallet in his pockets. No stolen items. But the woman's story stayed the same. I think it was him. So they charged him. Now he stood in court, wearing the same hoodie. His public defender looked bored. His name had been mispronounced twice. No one had even asked if he wanted to speak. Then the judge walked in, older, white, dressed in a long black robe. His gaze landed on Malik and didn't leave. Well, the judge said, with a smirk, this should be quick. The courtroom chuckled. Malik looked down, but as the judge began to mock him, Malik reached into his coat, not for anything stolen, but for something far more powerful. It was a Friday morning in late fall, the kind of day where the sun barely warmed the ground, and people moved quickly to get inside. The courtroom was nearly full. Some were there for traffic tickets, others for small claims. But when Malik's name was called, the room got quiet. He stood up slowly. His hands stayed in his pockets. His eyes didn't look left or right, just forward. His grandmother sat in the back row, clutching her purse. She had worn her best dress, even though it was patched at the sleeves. She believed in showing respect, even when it wasn't given. The judge leaned forward. "Let's see," he said, flipping through a file. 17 years old, no father on record, lives in public housing, accused of theft. Shocking. More laughter in the room. Malik didn't flinch. The prosecutor, a man with slicked back hair, rolled his eyes and said, "Your Honor, we're recommending community service and a warning. No real damage done." But the judge wasn't done smirking. He looked at Malik like he'd already decided who he was. "Maybe next time," the judge said. "Try stealing something worth your future." That's when Malik pulled a folded letter from his pocket. Not quickly, not to prove anything. Just quietly, as if the moment had finally come. What was in that letter would flip the courtroom upside down, and silence the man who thought he had all the power. Keep watching to see how one boy's truth shattered a judge's pride. The courtroom was old, the kind with heavy wooden benches that creaked when people moved. Faded flags stood in the corners, and the judge's bench was raised high above everyone else, like a throne. The walls were beige and cracked, with dust in the corners. It smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. There was no warmth in the room, not from the heat, and not from the people. Malik stood at the defendant's table, with a chipped nameplate that barely held his name. His lawyer was a young man who looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. He tapped on his phone behind a thick folder of other cases. The judge sat above, looking down, one eyebrow raised. His chair was cushioned, unlike anyone else's. Every time he leaned back, the leather creaked, like it was groaning with judgment. In the audience, people whispered. Some stared at Malik with curious eyes, others, with pity. None of them knew him. None had asked his side, and that's how this courtroom worked. Quiet until laughter, still until someone powerful spoke. It wasn't built for boys like Malik, it was built to watch them fall. But the letter Malik held didn't shake in his hands. It was folded carefully, handled with care. As he placed it on the table in front of him, he didn't say a word. He just waited. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows low, clearly annoyed. But the moment he read the letter, the silence in the room turned into something else. Malik had been raised to believe that truth didn't need to shout. His grandmother always told him, "Let people talk, let them guess. Just make sure when it's your turn, they hear you." So he stayed quiet through the arrest. He stayed calm through the lies. He listened when the woman pointed at him, even though she didn't know his name, even though her voice shook, like even she wasn't sure. He could have spoken up. He could have told them where he'd been, that he had an alibi, that he was on the phone with his grandma the whole time, talking about what groceries to bring home. He could have begged, cried, shouted. But Malik didn't want mercy. He wanted truth. That letter in his coat pocket, it wasn't new. He'd carried it for weeks, waiting for someone to look him in the eyes and see him, really see him. No one had. So now, here, in this courtroom where they thought he was just another poor kid with no future, he laid it down like a final move in a game they didn't even know they were playing. The letter was short, only a few lines, but who it was from changed everything. Because when the judge picked up that paper and read the signature, his face turned pale, and suddenly the whole courtroom leaned in. The judge squinted at the letter, his smile faded. His fingers gripped the paper tighter as he read. Then he read it again, slower this time. The room, once filled with chuckles and whispers, went completely still. He looked up at Malik, then down at the letter, then back again. His mouth opened but no sound came out. The letter wasn't just a defense, it was from the Chief Justice of the state, the highest judge in the region, a man known for being strict but fair, a man this courtroom respected above all. The message was handwritten, simple, direct. "This young man is my son. He has been under my care since his mother passed. He's a scholar, a leader in his school, and a good citizen. Any harm to his name will be met with the full strength of my office. Make your next move carefully." Signed, Chief Justice Nathaniel Brooks. A name that held weight, a name this judge couldn't argue with, because it was his superior. And just like that, everything changed. The same courtroom that mocked Malik now stared in stunned silence. The same people who laughed now looked at the floor. Even Malik's tired lawyer finally sat up straight, eyes wide. The judge cleared his throat, trying to steady himself. "I see," he muttered. But his voice no longer carried power, because Malik didn't just clear his name. He flipped the room, and in the moment that followed, the judge did something no one expected, something that would leave a mark far beyond that courtroom. The judge looked shaken. His hands, once firm on the bench, now trembled as he folded the letter again, neatly, like it might burn if mishandled. He cleared his throat, and sat up straighter, trying to return to the man in charge. But the room had already shifted. The air felt different. He was no longer looking at a troublemaker. He was looking at the son of his boss, a boy he'd publicly laughed at, insulted and belittled. The judge began, fumbling his words. "I believe we may have rushed to judgment. This case is dismissed. No apology, no explanation, just a quick exit from the hole he dug for himself." Malik didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply nodded and stepped back, but the silence spoke louder than anything. One woman in the crowd covered her mouth. Another whispered, "He's his son." The judge tried to move on, calling for the next case, but the weight of what happened lingered. People kept looking at Malik, not with pity this time, but with something like respect, or maybe shame. Malik walked back to his grandmother, who stood with tears in her eyes. She didn't say much either, just hugged him close. And as they walked out together, the courtroom stayed quiet. For once no one had anything to say. But what stayed with people that day wasn't just the twist, it was the quiet strength of a boy who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. When the courtroom doors closed behind them, Malik and his grandmother stepped out into the cold. The wind was sharp, but it didn't matter now. The world felt different somehow, like the weight that had followed Malik for days, for weeks, had finally been lifted. As they walked toward the bus stop, his grandmother spoke softly. "You know, Malik," she said, People might look at you differently now. They might understand. Malik nodded. He didn't need words to explain. His grandmother always understood him without needing an explanation. But he knew something that day, something powerful. Sometimes the truth doesn't speak for itself. Sometimes it takes someone strong enough to carry it silently, even when no one believes you, even when the world is quick to judge and slow to listen. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about Malik's innocence, it was about respect, about the importance of knowing who you are, no matter what others might see. Malik's truth wasn't loud. It wasn't a fiery speech. It was a quiet letter, a letter that changed everything. And as they boarded the bus, Malik glanced up at the rearview mirror, watching the courthouse fade away. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. His name was cleared. But more than that, he had reminded everyone in that room that a person's worth doesn't depend on where they come from, how they look, or what they wear. It's about who they are, and Malik was more than just a teenager in a hoodie. He was a son, a student, a future leader, and above all, he was a person worthy of respect. Malik's story reminds us all that sometimes the loudest truth is the quietest one. So don't let anyone define you by their first impressions. Stay true to who you are. If you believe in something, never be afraid to stand firm. If this story touched you, leave a comment below and share it with someone who needs a reminder of the power of silence and strength. Remember, the truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes.